The unexpected arrival. First contact on the edge of known space. The Crethean Dominion had maintained peace across the eastern spiral for 3,000 years. Their military fleet was the largest in the known galaxy, with over 40,000 warships patrolling the trade routes and border sectors. Commander Vex'Alan had served in the Dominion fleet for 2 centuries, and in all that time he had never encountered a species that posed any real threat to Crethean superiority. Most civilizations they discovered were either too primitive to leave their home worlds or too weak to challenge Dominion authority. On the 73rd cycle of the season, Vex'Alan's patrol squadron was conducting routine scans near the Frontier Nebula when something unusual appeared on their sensors. A single vessel had emerged from hyperspace, a ship design that matched none of the known species in the galactic database. The vessel was broadcasting identification codes in multiple languages, clearly attempting to announce its peaceful intentions to anyone who might be listening. Vex'Alan ordered his squadron to intercept. 6 Crethean cruisers changed course, their sleek golden hulls reflecting the light of nearby stars as they moved to surround the unknown vessel. As they approached, the scanners provided more detailed information about the strange ship. It was classified as a medium-sized vessel, approximately 800 meters in length, with a design that seemed almost crude compared to Crethean engineering standards. A ship built for purpose. The human vessel looked nothing like the elegant warships of the Crethean fleet. Where Crethean ships featured smooth curves and artistic flourishes that demonstrated their advanced manufacturing capabilities, this ship was all straight lines and angular surfaces. The hull appeared to be constructed from layered armor plating, with visible seams where different sections had been welded together. Large cylindrical structures protruded from the sides, their purpose unclear but somehow menacing in their industrial simplicity. The ship's exterior was painted in a dull gray color, with white markings along the hull that identified it as the UFNS Defiant. Vex'Alan studied the vessel with growing curiosity. The humans, as the database now identified them, had only been catalogued by Dominion scouts 15 years ago. At that time, they had barely achieved faster-than-light capability and were considered decades away from developing any significant spacefaring civilization. Yet here was one of their vessels, alone and far from their home system, in a region of space they should not have been able to reach. Vex'Alan opened a communication channel, using the standard Dominion greeting protocol. He informed the human vessel that they had entered Crethean territory and must submit to inspection and registration. It was a routine procedure, one that thousands of ships underwent every cycle. Most captains simply complied, understanding that cooperation with the Dominion was the wisest course of action. The human response. The response from the human ship came quickly. A male appeared on Vex'Alan's display screen, his appearance strange and somewhat disturbing to Crethean eyes. The human had pale skin, dark hair cut very short, and eyes that seemed to assess everything with intense focus. He wore a dark blue uniform with various insignias and medals attached to the chest. When he spoke, his voice was calm and professional, but there was an edge to it that Vex'Alan found unsettling. The human identified himself as Captain Marcus Chin of the United Federation Navy ship Defiant. He explained that his vessel was on a diplomatic survey mission, collecting data on stellar phenomena and attempting to make peaceful contact with other civilizations. Captain Chin stated that while he respected the Crethean Dominion's claim to this region, his ship was traveling through neutral space according to the interstellar navigation charts his government had obtained from traitor species. Vex'Alan listened with growing impatience. The humans clearly did not understand how things worked in this part of the galaxy. Their navigation charts were outdated or incorrect. This region had been under Crethean control for over a millennium, and any ship passing through was subject to Dominion law. He explained this to Captain Chin using small words and simple concepts, the way one might explain things to a child. Captain Chin's expression did not change. He listened politely, nodded occasionally, and then delivered his response. He said that the United Federation did not recognize territorial claims in deep space beyond a species' home system and its immediate colonies. He said that his ship would continue on its planned course, and that he hoped the Crethean Dominion would respect humanity's right to peaceful exploration. Then he did something that shocked Vex'Alan to his core. He closed the communication channel first, ending the conversation on his own terms. The demonstration of force. No species ended communications with a Crethean commander. It simply was not done. Vex'Alan felt his chest plates flush with anger, a physiological response his species displayed when insulted or threatened. His officers looked at him expectantly, waiting for orders. The humans had shown disrespect. They had refused to acknowledge Dominion authority. They needed to be taught a lesson. Vex'Alan gave the order. A warning shot, precisely calculated to pass within 50 meters of the human ship's bow. It would demonstrate Crethean weapons capability without causing damage, and surely the humans would understand their mistake and comply. One of his cruisers fired immediately. A beam of concentrated energy lanced across the space between ships, a weapon that could cut through most known armor materials like they were paper. The human ship reacted instantly. Before the Crethean weapon even reached its intended path, the Defiant's maneuvering thrusters fired with incredible force. The entire vessel shifted position in a matter of seconds, moving with an agility that seemed impossible for a ship of its size. The Crethean energy beam passed harmlessly through the space where the Defiant had been just moments before. Vex'Alan stared at his tactical display in disbelief. The speed and precision of that maneuver should not have been possible. The gravitational forces involved should have crushed any crew inside the ship. Either the humans had developed inertial dampening technology far beyond what their civilization level suggested, or they were willing to sacrifice their own safety to avoid an attack. Neither possibility was comforting. A new kind of enemy. Before Vex'Alan could issue new orders, his sensor officer reported something alarming. The human ship had activated weapons systems. Panels along the hull had retracted, revealing multiple launch tubes and what appeared to be magnetic acceleration cannons. The Defiant was not fleeing or preparing to surrender. It was preparing to fight. Captain Chen's face appeared on the communication screen again, but this time there was no politeness in his expression. His eyes were cold and hard, the look of someone who had made a difficult decision and would not be swayed from it. He spoke in clear, measured tones. He said that his ship had just been fired upon without provocation. He said that according to United Federation military doctrine, this constituted an act of war. He said that his vessel would defend itself with lethal force if threatened again. Vex'Alan nearly laughed. One human ship against 6 Crethean cruisers. The odds were absurd. He tried once more to explain the situation, to make the humans understand that resistance was futile. Captain Chen listened in silence, and when Vex'Alan finished speaking, the human captain delivered his response. He said 3 words that would change everything. He said, "Test me then." The communication channel closed. The human ship's weapons reached full charge. And for the first time in 200 years of service, Commander Vex'Alan felt something he had forgotten was possible. He felt afraid. The sensors showed energy readings from the human vessel that made no sense. The power output from their reactor was far beyond what should have been possible for a ship of that size. The magnetic signatures from their weapons suggested acceleration capabilities that would make their projectiles nearly unstoppable at close range. Vex'Alan made a decision. He ordered his squadron to power up their shields and weapons to full combat status. If the humans wanted to fight, the Crethean Dominion would show them why no one challenged their authority. 6 ships against 1. The outcome was certain. But as his crews prepared for battle, Vex'Alan could not shake the feeling that something was terribly wrong. The humans were too confident, too calm in the face of overwhelming odds. The battle begins. The first shot came from the Defiant. Not from the large magnetic cannons that the Cretheans had been watching so carefully, but from smaller point defense weapons that had been hidden in recessed ports along the hull. Dozens of projectiles streaked toward the Crethean formation, moving at velocities that seemed impossible. The projectiles were simple in design, just dense metal cylinders accelerated to a significant fraction of light speed, but their simplicity made them terrifyingly effective. The Crethean shields absorbed most of the impacts, but the force behind each projectile was staggering. One of the cruisers on the flank reported shield degradation of 30% from just the first volley. Vex'Alan ordered return fire immediately. All 6 ships opened up with their energy weapons, filling the space around the human vessel with beams of destructive force that should have vaporized any ship in seconds. The Defiant's shields flared brilliant white as they absorbed the impacts. For a moment, Vex'Alan thought they had succeeded. No shield could withstand the combined firepower of 6 Crethean cruisers. But then the light faded and the human ship was still there, completely intact and already firing again. This time the magnetic cannons spoke, launching projectiles the size of ground vehicles at velocities that made them nearly impossible to track. One of the projectiles struck a Crethean cruiser directly on the forward shield emitter. The shield collapsed instantly, and the projectile continued through, punching into the hull with devastating effect. The cruiser began to tumble, atmosphere venting from multiple breaches, its main power systems failing. A second projectile struck another cruiser in the engine section, and that ship simply came apart, torn into pieces by the catastrophic energy release. Understanding the truth. In less than 30 seconds, the Crethean squadron had lost 2 ships. The survivors were already pulling back, their commanders suddenly understanding what Vex'Alan was only beginning to comprehend. The humans were not a primitive species learning to navigate the stars. They were a warrior race that had somehow compressed centuries of weapons development into just a few decades. Every system on that ship had been designed with one purpose in mind: to survive combat and destroy enemies. Vex'Alan watched his tactical display with growing horror as another cruiser took damage. The humans were not using exotic weapons or advanced technology that the Cretheans could not understand. They were using simple kinetic force, basic physics applied with brutal efficiency. But the power behind those weapons, the speed of their targeting systems, the strength of their shields, all of it suggested a civilization that had spent its entire existence preparing for war. Captain Chen's face appeared on the communication screen one final time. He was breathing heavily, and there was a cut above his left eye that was bleeding. The human ship had taken damage from the sustained fire, but it was still functional and still fighting. Chen spoke quickly, his voice urgent. He said that his vessel would cease fire if the Crethean ships withdrew immediately. He said that humanity had no desire for war, but would not back down from anyone who threatened them. He said that his government would be willing to open diplomatic negotiations, but only after this incident was resolved peacefully. Vex'Alan gave the order to withdraw. His squadron pulled back to a safe distance, damaged ships limping along with their more fortunate companions. As they retreated, the human vessel did not pursue. It simply held position, weapons still powered and ready, watching them go. Vex'Alan sat in his command chair and tried to process what had just happened. The Crethean Dominion had encountered thousands of species over the millennia. None had ever fought like this. None had ever hurt them like this. He sent an urgent message to Dominion High Command, marked with the highest priority codes. The message was simple but devastating in its implications. The humans were not a primitive species to be catalogued and monitored. They were a military power that could challenge even the Crethean fleet. And if one human ship could do this much damage to a Crethean squadron, what could an entire fleet do? The question haunted Vex'Alan as his damaged squadron began the long journey home, leaving the human ship alone in the darkness of space, victorious. The price of arrogance. The call for reinforcements. Commander Vex'Alan's report reached Dominion High Command within hours of the engagement. The response was immediate and predictable. The Crethean military leadership refused to believe that a single primitive vessel could have defeated 6 of their cruisers. They accused Vex'Alan of exaggeration, of poor tactical decisions, of cowardice in the face of an inferior enemy. The recorded sensor data from the battle was reviewed by dozens of analysts, all searching for evidence of equipment malfunction or crew error that could explain the impossible results. But the data did not lie. The human ship had moved with speeds that should have killed its crew. It had absorbed weapons fire that should have destroyed it. It had struck back with devastating accuracy and overwhelming force. The analysts concluded that either humanity possessed technology far beyond their apparent civilization level, or they had developed military capabilities through some other means that the Dominion did not understand. Either way, the High Command decided that a stronger response was necessary. Fleet Admiral Corthaven was given command of the punitive expedition. He was a legend among the Crethean military, a commander who had never lost a battle in 300 years of service. Under his leadership, a battle group of 30 warships was assembled. The fleet included heavy cruisers, battleships, and even one of the massive dreadnought-class vessels that served as mobile fortresses. It was a force capable of conquering entire planetary systems, and it was being sent to deal with a single human ship. Admiral Corthaven studied every detail of Vex'Alan's encounter. He reviewed the tactical recordings dozens of times, analyzing every movement of the human vessel, every weapon discharge, every defensive maneuver. He noted the incredible acceleration the ship achieved, the devastating power of its kinetic weapons, and the remarkable strength of its defensive shields. But he also noted something that Vex'Alan had missed in the chaos of combat. The human ship had taken damage. Its shields had flickered under sustained fire. It had been hurt. The trap is set. The human vessel Defiant had not moved from its position. Captain Chen had sent messages to both the Crethean Dominion and his own government, explaining the situation and requesting guidance. He received orders to maintain his position and avoid further conflict if possible, but to defend his ship and crew if attacked again. Chen knew that reinforcements were at least 2 weeks away. If the Cretheans came back with a larger force, he would have to face them alone. Chen spent those days preparing. His crew worked around the clock, repairing damage from the first engagement, redistributing ammunition, recalibrating targeting systems. The ship's chief engineer, a woman named Sarah Okonkwo, managed to increase the shield output by another 15% through creative rewiring of the power distribution systems. The weapons officer, Lieutenant James Park, developed new firing solutions that would maximize damage against multiple targets. Everyone aboard knew what was coming. When Admiral Corthaven's fleet emerged from hyperspace, they did so in a formation designed to overwhelm and intimidate. 30 ships arranged in a sphere around the human vessel, weapons charged and shields at maximum power. The sheer size of the force was staggering. The smallest ship in the Crethean fleet was larger than the Defiant, and the dreadnought at the formation center was nearly 3 kilometers long, bristling with enough weapons to level a continent. Admiral Corthaven opened communications immediately. He did not bother with pleasantries or diplomatic language. He informed Captain Chin that the Defiant was surrounded and outgunned. He demanded immediate surrender. The human crew would be taken prisoner, the ship would be confiscated, and humanity would answer for its attack on Crethean forces. There would be no negotiation and no second chances. Captain Chin had 30 seconds to comply. Humanity's doctrine revealed. Captain Chin appeared on the communication screen, and Admiral Corthaven was struck by how calm the human looked. There was no fear in those eyes, no panic or desperation. Chin listened to the demands without interruption, and when the Admiral finished speaking, the human captain took a slow breath before responding. What he said next would become legendary across the galaxy, repeated in tactical academies and military briefings for generations to come. Chin explained that humanity had spent 10,000 years fighting itself. Every nation, every tribe, every group of humans had waged war against others for resources, territory, ideology, or simple survival. They had developed weapons of incredible destructive power and had learned hard lessons about combat through rivers of blood and mountains of sacrifice. When humanity finally reached the stars, they brought all of that knowledge with them. They knew what worked in battle and what did not. They understood that in the vacuum of space, there was no room for beautiful designs or elegant solutions. There was only what killed and what got you killed. The Defiant, Chin continued, was not designed to be the most advanced ship humanity could build. It was designed to be the most effective weapon they could deploy. Every system had been tested in combat simulations thousands of times. Every piece of equipment had been built to military specifications that prioritized function over form. The crew had trained for years, running battle drills until their responses became instinctive. And most importantly, humanity had learned something that the Crethean Dominion had apparently forgotten. They had learned that numbers alone did not guarantee victory. Chen's expression hardened as he delivered his final statement. He said that the Defiant would not surrender. He said that if Admiral Corthaven wanted to take his ship, the Cretheans would have to destroy it, and destroying it would cost them dearly. He said that humanity remembered every lesson learned in blood, and today the Cretheans were going to learn some of those lessons themselves. Then Captain Chin closed the communication channel and gave his crew the order they had been expecting. Battle stations. The mathematics of war. Admiral Corthaven felt his confidence waver for just a moment. The human captain's words had been delivered with absolute certainty, the voice of someone who knew exactly what was about to happen and had accepted it. But the Admiral pushed his doubts aside. 30 ships against 1. The mathematics were simple and undeniable. He gave the order to open fire. The space around the Defiant erupted with destructive energy. Beams of plasma and concentrated radiation converged on the human ship from every direction simultaneously. The Crethean fleet poured enough firepower into that small section of space to vaporize an asteroid. The human shields flared so brightly that the light was visible on sensors hundreds of kilometers away. For 5 full seconds the bombardment continued, and then Admiral Corthaven ordered a ceasefire to assess the damage. The sensors cleared slowly as the energy dissipated. When they could finally see the human ship again, Admiral Corthaven felt ice form in his chest. The Defiant was still there. Its shields had held, though the readings showed they were down to 40% capacity. But the ship itself was undamaged and already maneuvering, its main engines firing at full power as it accelerated toward the nearest edge of the Crethean formation. What happened next unfolded so quickly that many Crethean crews did not understand what was occurring until it was over. The Defiant did not try to break through the encirclement. Instead, it dove toward the 3 cruisers positioned on the formation's lower arc, its point defense weapons firing continuously. The storm of projectiles forced those ships to divert power to their forward shields, weakening their defenses in other areas. The counterattack. As the Defiant closed to knife-fighting range, it unleashed its main weapons. The magnetic cannons fired in sequence, each projectile timed to strike a different target. The first round hit a cruiser's shield generator and the shield collapsed. The second round followed immediately, punching through the now unprotected hull and detonating the ship's main reactor from the inside. The cruiser exploded in a ball of expanding plasma and debris. Before the other Crethean ships could react, the Defiant had already shifted targets. Its secondary batteries engaged a second cruiser, overwhelming the vessel's point defense systems with sheer volume of fire. Dozens of smaller projectiles hammered into the ship's hull, each impact causing catastrophic damage. The cruiser began to break apart, its structural integrity compromised by the relentless assault. The third cruiser managed to land a solid hit on the Defiant's side armor. The impact cratered the plating and knocked out several secondary systems, but the human ship's momentum carried it past the Crethean formation before the other vessels could adjust their firing solutions. The Defiant had broken through the encirclement, leaving 2 destroyed cruisers and widespread chaos in its wake. Admiral Corthaven watched in stunned disbelief as his formation disintegrated. His ships were moving to pursue the human vessel, but they were getting in each other's way, blocking firing lanes and creating confusion. The humans had somehow anticipated this, had planned for it. They had struck at the weakest point in the formation and exploited the Crethean fleet's own numbers against them. A warrior's respect. The battle continued for another 20 minutes, but the outcome was no longer in doubt. The Defiant used hit-and-run tactics, striking quickly and then pulling away before the Crethean ships could bring their superior numbers to bear. The human vessel was faster and more maneuverable than anything in the Crethean fleet. It could accelerate and decelerate at rates that should have been impossible, making it nearly impossible to target effectively. By the time Admiral Corthaven ordered a general withdrawal, his fleet had lost 8 ships destroyed and 14 more damaged to varying degrees. The Defiant had not escaped unscathed. Its armor was cratered in multiple places, several weapon systems were offline, and the shields were operating at minimal capacity. But the ship was still functional, still capable of fighting, and Captain Chen was still broadcasting his defiance to anyone listening. Admiral Corthaven sat in his command chair aboard the dreadnought, staring at the tactical display with ancient eyes that had seen too much. He had fought countless battles, commanded thousands of ships, and conquered dozens of worlds. But he had never encountered an enemy like this. The humans did not fight with honor or glory in mind. They fought to win, using every advantage they could find and showing no mercy to those who threatened them. The Admiral opened a final communication channel to the Defiant. Captain Chen appeared on his screen, looking exhausted and covered in soot from an electrical fire somewhere on his ship. The two commanders regarded each other in silence for a long moment, warriors from different worlds understanding something that words could not express. Then Admiral Corthaven spoke, his voice heavy with a respect he had not felt in centuries. He told Captain Chen that the Crethean Dominion had made a mistake. Humanity was not a primitive species to be conquered or controlled. They were a military power that had earned the right to chart their own course among the stars. The Admiral said that he would recommend to High Command that diplomatic relations be established immediately, and that humanity be recognized as an equal civilization rather than a subject race. He said one more thing before ending the transmission. He said that in 300 years of warfare, he had never met a more dangerous opponent. The legend spreads. Captain Chen's response was simple and dignified. He thanked the Admiral for his wisdom and expressed hope that their two civilizations could find peace. He said that humanity had no desire to be enemies with the Crethean Dominion, but would defend their freedom against anyone who threatened it. The communication ended, and the Crethean fleet withdrew from the sector, leaving the battered human ship alone once again. News of the battle spread across the galaxy with the speed of light itself. Traitor species and information brokers carried the story to every corner of known space. The Crethean Dominion, the most powerful military force in the Eastern Spiral, had been defeated by a single human warship. The details varied depending on who was telling the story, but the core truth remained the same. Humanity had proven that they could fight and win against overwhelming odds. Other civilizations began to reassess their assumptions about the humans. Scout fleets were dispatched to observe Earth and its colonies from a safe distance. Diplomatic missions were hastily organized. Trade negotiations that had been dismissed as unimportant suddenly became top priority. Within months, humanity went from being an obscure species on the frontier to one of the most talked about civilizations in the galaxy. For Captain Marcus Chen and the crew of the Defiant, there was no celebration. They had fought because they had no other choice and they had won at tremendous cost. 3 crew members had died during the battle, and another 7 were seriously injured. The ship would require months of repairs before it could be considered combat-ready again. But they had achieved something remarkable. They had shown the galaxy that humanity would not bow to threats or submit to domination. They had earned respect through strength and courage. A new galactic order. The incident at the Frontier Nebula changed the balance of power in the galaxy. The Crethean Dominion, shaken by their defeat, began to reform their military doctrine and tactics. They studied human warfare with intense interest, trying to understand how such a young species had developed such effective combat capabilities. Other major powers watched these developments with concern, wondering if humanity represented a threat to their own interests. But humanity did not seek conquest or expansion through force. They established diplomatic relations with dozens of species, offering trade agreements and mutual defense pacts. They shared some of their technology with allied civilizations, though they carefully guarded the secrets of their most powerful weapons systems. They built a reputation as honest brokers and reliable partners, but also as a species that could not be bullied or intimidated. Admiral Corthaven kept his word. He recommended that the Crethean Dominion recognize humanity as an equal power, and after much debate, the High Command agreed. A formal treaty was signed within a year of the battle, establishing borders, trade routes, and protocols for resolving disputes peacefully. The Admiral himself led the delegation to Earth, where he met with human leaders and shared stories of his long career with military officials who listened with rapt attention. In the decades that followed, the story of the Defiant became legend. It was taught in military academies across 100 worlds as an example of courage, tactical brilliance, and the importance of never underestimating an opponent. Captain Marcus Chin retired from active service and spent his remaining years writing about his experiences, helping to train the next generation of human officers who would carry on the traditions he had helped establish. The legacy lives on. The encounter between the Defiant and the Crethean fleet demonstrated a truth that the galaxy had forgotten over millennia of relative peace. It showed that technological advancement and superior numbers were not enough to guarantee victory in combat. What mattered was the will to fight, the skill to execute complex maneuvers under pressure, and the courage to face impossible odds without flinching. Humanity possessed all of these qualities in abundance, forged through countless generations of warfare on their home world. Other species looked at humanity with a mixture of respect and fear. They wondered what would happen if humans ever decided to abandon their peaceful approach and embrace conquest. The humans themselves were aware of this concern and worked hard to demonstrate that their military capabilities were for defense only. They established strict protocols for the use of force and maintained transparent communication with their galactic neighbors. But everyone who knew the story of the Defiant understood one simple truth. Humanity could be a friend or an ally, a trading partner or a diplomatic mediator. But they could never be conquered or controlled. They had proven that a single human warship, properly designed and crewed by determined warriors, could stand against forces that seemed overwhelming. And if one ship could accomplish so much, what could humanity achieve if they were ever forced to mobilize their full strength? The galaxy never wanted to find out the answer to that question. The legend of the Defiant ensured that humanity was treated with the respect they deserved, and the lessons learned in those desperate battles near the Frontier Nebula echoed across the stars for generations. The age of humanity had begun, not through aggression or conquest, but through the courage of a single crew who refused to surrender when surrender seemed like the only option. Their legacy would endure as long as humans sailed between the stars, a reminder that determination and skill could overcome any obstacle, no matter how impossible it might seem.